Bathed in the gentle illumination of Atlanta's twilight, Aisha Johnson entered the elegant establishment, only to encounter disdain from the personnel. Her deep complexion and unadorned gray sweater set her apart in their gaze, deemed unfit for their lofty ideals. Unbeknownst to them, her husband Daniel Johnson, a tech billionaire who transformed the software industry, was just moments away from altering their lives completely. If the story of bias and victory captivates you, be sure to subscribe to stay connected with this video. Let us know which country you're tuning in from and where you're experiencing Aisha's journey. Stay tuned, as the twist will surely astonish you. The sun dipped beneath Atlanta's sharp skyline, casting the city in a twilight glow that softened the outlines of its towering steel and glass structures. Streetlights flickered to life, casting a warm glow on the asphalt, as the soft murmur of evening traffic resonated like a far-off heartbeat. Aisha Johnson stepped out of the community center on Auburn Avenue, her sneakers making a gentle sound against the worn steps. At 32, she navigated with a subtle strength, her dark skin radiating softly beneath the city's gleam. Her gray sweater hung effortlessly over her figure, complemented by jeans that had softened from endless days of wear. Her hands, dusted with chalk from a whiteboard she had been scrawling on, bore the marks of her afternoon spent imparting knowledge on leadership to black teens from the city's overlooked corners. This evening held a unique significance. Aisha halted on the sidewalk, tilting her head to savor the brisk October air. The aroma of roasted peanuts wafted from a nearby street cart, mingling with the pungent sting of car exhaust. She looked at her watch, 6:47 p.m., and a subtle smile played on her lips. Impeccable timing. She had a single destination to visit before returning home, a delightful secret she had been cherishing for weeks. In just 7 days, she and her husband, Daniel Johnson, would celebrate a decade of their marriage. It had been a decade since their gazes met over a small table in the ivory tower, back when he was a thin, ambitious coder brimming with unconventional thoughts, and she was a community organizer radiating a warmth that could illuminate any space. Daniel was a tech giant, a white man who had ascended the ranks of a world not designed for dreamers like him to share with someone like her. And Aisha stood by him as his steadfast support, his equal in every aspect. She longed to return to that initial evening, to the spot where their unexpected affection blossomed. The ivory tower transcended the notion of a mere restaurant. It stood as a monument to Atlanta's elite, a magnificent structure of glass and marble nestled in the very center of downtown. Its name carried an air of exclusivity, its entrances protected by tacit conventions. Aisha was indifferent to its luster this evening. She hadn't arrived for the meal, not just yet. She simply had to secure a reservation for next Friday, a subtle nod to their history amidst Daniel's unyielding calendar of investor presentations and software launches. Her fingers brushed against the phone nestled in her pocket, a restless urge to send him a message stirring within her. A brief, "Can you figure out what I am doing?" Yet she restrained herself. This was her hidden treasure, a revelation she would share when the cosmos conspired in her favor. She embarked on her journey, her pace unwavering, navigating through the lively evening crowd. Atlanta throbbed with life, suits barking into phones, couples toasting at sidewalk cafes, a saxophonist drawing out a soulful melody from his instrument. Aisha's eyes followed the skyline, the emerald light of the Bank of America Tower cutting through the encroaching twilight. She adored the city, its rawness, its essence, felt like home, even when it hurt. As a woman of color married to a man of a different race, she had maneuvered through the curious glances and the hushed inquiries. But tonight, she wasn't preoccupied with the burden of her gaze. She envisioned Daniel's smile when she revealed this to him, the youthful one he'd shown during their first meal when he promised to create a future for her with nothing but code and bravery. The journey to the ivory tower spanned 15 minutes, her sneakers softly brushing against the concrete as she veered onto Peachtree Street. The restaurant loomed ahead, its exterior a testament to extravagance. Lofty windows bathed the pavement in a gentle glow, showcasing a tableau of pristine fabrics and shimmering tableware. Through the glass, Aisha caught sight of Atlanta's elite, men in tuxedos and women in elegant gowns, their laughter resonating softly in the background. She pulled at her sweater, suddenly aware of the chalk dust clinging to her fingers. She had not put on anything special. What would motivate her to do that? This was merely a brief interlude, not the grand event. Next week, she would float in on Daniel's arm, her curls elegantly swept up, her dress shimmering in the light. This evening, she was simply Aisha, grounded and dusted with chalk. As she approached the entrance, her image danced momentarily in the pristine glass door. For a fleeting moment, she hesitated. She didn't belong in that lofty realm. She preferred the atmosphere of a West Side dive, savoring catfish and cornbread among people who wouldn't even glance at her jeans. Yet, this location was steeped in history. Daniel's anxious chuckle over shrimp and grits, his fair hand grazing hers as he vowed a life they would create together despite the challenges. She stood tall, easing the door open with a subtle whisper. The air enveloped her, a refreshing breeze infused with the delicate fragrance of lavender and the deep, complex notes of aged wine. The murmur in the dining room faded, a wave of focus as gazes turned in her direction. The thick glass door of the ivory tower closed softly behind Aisha Johnson, enclosing her in a realm that was both unfamiliar and breathtaking. The atmosphere within was a stark departure from the brisk October evening she had just exited. Charming, infused with lavender and the subtle hint of polished leather, it enveloped her like an unseen shield. The polished marble floor shimmered under her sneakers, mirroring the warm radiance of chandeliers that dangled like stars from the lofty ceiling. Every crystal prism captured the light, dispersing it throughout the room in a mesmerizing display of opulence and exclusivity. Beyond the grand windows, the skyline of Atlanta sparkled with brilliance. Yet within it was an entirely different realm. Amidst the pristine white tablecloths, the delicate chime of crystal stemware fills the air, accompanied by the soft murmur of the city's elite, their voices weaving a rich tapestry beneath the rhythmic clatter of silverware. Aisha stepped forward, her sneakers making a soft squeak on the polished stone, a sound that echoed through the dining room like a pebble falling into calm water. Eyes were drawn, discreet yet undeniable, gentlemen in finely crafted tuxedos halting their conversations, ladies in shimmering gowns peering over the edges of their wineglasses. Their gaze held, not out of curiosity but with a chill, a keen edge that cut through the air. She sensed it immediately, that familiar heaviness against her chest, the unvoiced inquiry about her existence, her dark skin and gray sweater standing out sharply against the room's lavishness. Her jeans bore the marks of wear, faded and dusted with chalk from her day at the community center, setting her apart as an outsider in this realm of privilege. Yet Aisha remained unfazed. She had no intention of fitting in, not this evening. She had come for Daniel, to celebrate their anniversary, to revisit the place where their love had ignited. The dining room unfolded like a canvas, a vast expanse of immaculate tables adorned with linen so white it appeared to radiate light. Servers in sharp black attire moved gracefully among them, as quiet as whispers, carrying trays adorned with shimmering oysters and elegant flutes of champagne. The atmosphere hummed with a subtle confidence of affluence, laughter ringing like chimes of currency, dialogues woven with the threads of influence and gain. Aisha's eyes roamed the room, settling on the maitre d' station at its center. The podium, crafted from dark wood, stood as a symbol of power within this opulent realm. And behind it stood Sophia, a woman whose fitted black suit embraced her form with the precision of a warrior's armor. Her hair was drawn back into a tight bun, her stance unwavering, and her gaze, those piercing eyes, fixed on Aisha the instant she entered the room. Sophia's gaze was sharp, slicing through the distance that separated them with meticulous accuracy. The gaze swept over Aisha, from the untamed curls that framed her face to the worn-out toes of her sneakers, pausing on the chalk smudges that clung to her hands. The gaze held no warmth, no hint of welcome. It was a cold, calculating scrutiny that felt as though it laid Aisha bare. She had encountered that expression far too often, in conference rooms and shops, on sidewalks, and on staircases. It was the gaze that measured her value by her appearance, her attire, and her mere presence in an environment not designed for her. Yet Aisha had mastered the art of confronting it directly, allowing it to glide off her like droplets on a smooth surface. With a determined posture, she took a deep breath, gaining composure as she approached the podium. The room buzzed back to life, a soft murmur that enveloped the quiet, yet the heaviness of those first looks lingered on her, as if wrapped in a wet shroud. She sensed the gaze lingering on her, some subtle, others bold, as if her existence posed a riddle they were eager to unravel. A gentleman clad in a pinstripe suit whispered to his companion, a sly smirk playing on his lips. A woman adorned with sparkling diamonds cascading from her ears tilted her head, her brow lifting in subtle disdain. Aisha disregarded their presence, her attention honing in on Sophia, who stood with her hands delicately placed on the podium, fingers hovering above a leather-bound reservation book. The woman's expression was a facade of expertise, yet underneath it broiled a fiercer intensity, igniting Aisha's anxiety. "Good evening," Aisha said, her voice rich and resonant, slicing through the chill that lingered in the air between them. She presented a smile, modest yet sincere, the sort she would employ to soften doubts and charm newcomers. "I would like to book a reservation for next Friday, if that is feasible." Sophia's lips formed a tight line, her head tilting slightly to convey a sense of dismissal. For a moment, she remained silent, her stillness a barrier as unyielding as the marble beneath their feet. Then, her voice cut through the air, sharp and frigid, every word a fragment of frost. "Our schedule is completely filled for the upcoming 2 months." Aisha maintained her smile, even as the sharpness of that tone pierced her insides. She had anticipated opposition. Environments like this often flourished on it, yet she was not present to plead. She was present for Daniel, for their decade together, for the recollection of his pale hand grazing hers above a shared plate from years past. "I get that it's hectic," she remarked, her tone unwavering, her gaze fixed on Sophia. "It's for a memorable anniversary, my husband and I. This location holds significant value for us." She allowed the words to linger, a subtle request cloaked in determination, wishing they would break through the shield of Sophia's apathy. Yet Sophia's expression grew steely, her grip on the reservation book tightening, as if she were protecting something of immense value. The atmosphere around them grew dense, alive with a silent intensity that Aisha could sense, sharp and acrid, reminiscent of an impending tempest. Sophia's gaze swept across her once more, pausing on the gray sweater, the jeans, and the dark skin that appeared to disturb her mere existence. "Fully booked," she reiterated, her tone decisive like a door slamming shut. Aisha's heart raced, yet she stood firm, her smile a delicate barrier against the sting of rejection that wrapped around her. She still had a long way to go, that much was clear. The atmosphere in the lofty chamber was thick, a tense line drawn between Aisha Johnson and Sophia, the maitre d' whose frosty dismissal had just struck like a blow. Aisha stood resolutely at the podium, her gray sweater a subtle defiance against the room's dazzling opulence, her dark skin a quiet confrontation to its unvoiced conventions. "It's for a special anniversary, my husband and I. This location holds significant meaning for us," resonating in her mind as Sophia's stare pierced through her, heavy like the sound of a judge's gavel. The reservation book rested undisturbed beneath Sophia's perfectly groomed hands, a barrier Aisha found insurmountable. The dining room resonated with a gentle hum, the clinking of glasses, whispered boasts, and the delicate scrape of forks against porcelain creating a symphony of sounds. Yet, in this moment, time appeared to freeze, caught in the cool embrace of Sophia's quietude. Aisha felt a constriction in her chest, yet she stood firm, her smile a delicate beacon of hope. She was far from naive. She had entered enough spaces like this to understand the dynamics, how her presence, her identity, her chalk-dusted genes could disrupt the refined atmosphere of environments designed for affluence and privilege. However, this was not focused on them. It centered on Daniel, on the decade they had shared, on an evening she intended to take back from their history. She parted her lips to push forward once more, to intertwine her heat with Sophia's chill. As the atmosphere changed, An unexpected wave of pride sliced through the fragrant calm of lavender. Footsteps, precise and intentional, echoed against the marble as a shadow cast itself over the podium. Charles Grayson erupted onto the scene with the force of a tempest crashing upon tranquil waters. He was a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered and boisterous, his tailored suit a testament to privilege stretched taut across his frame. His face, flushed from either wine or anger, bore the self-satisfied confidence of a person who claimed dominion over every space he stepped into. He ignored Aisha's presence for the moment, charging straight to the podium, his voice resonating above the chatter of the dining room. "Sophia, my table isn't prepared yet. What's causing the delay? I mentioned that I expected the 85 Italian red to be decanted by this time." His words sliced through the air, sharp and commanding. As the atmosphere shifted around him, a wave of submission flowing through the space. The service team. Sophia's demeanor changed in an instant. The icy facade she had maintained for Aisha dissolved into a warm smile, her demeanor relaxing as she faced Charles. "Right away, Mr. Grayson," she murmured, her tone infused with a gentle warmth. Aisha had not received an offer. "I will attend to it right away." Her hands danced over the reservation book, suddenly animated, as if Charles's presence had sparked her into action. Aisha remained a quiet observer of this change, her own plea still hanging in the air, awaiting a response. The contrast pierced through her, sharp and bitter, echoing the hierarchies she had maneuvered throughout her entire existence. She gulped it down, her jaw clenching as she made another attempt. "As I previously mentioned." However, Charles interrupted her, finally turning his head in her direction. His eyes, a cold pale blue, scanned her with a sharp intensity, assessing her gray sweater, jeans, and dark skin in a single contemptuous glance. He avoided speaking to her, not in a direct manner. Instead, he leaned closer to Sophia, his voice lowering into a conspiratorial whisper designed to be heard. "I believe this place upheld certain standards," he remarked, a sneer forming on his lips. "Who allowed her to enter this space?" The words struck with force, capturing the attention of nearby tables, as a quiet laughter spread among the diners like a shadowy wave. Aisha's cheeks flushed, warmth spreading quickly, yet she anchored herself in place, her breath calming in the face of embarrassment. She held his gaze unwavering. "I'm simply attempting to secure a table for next week," she stated, her tone steady yet assertive, cutting through his derision. "Not dining tonight?" Charles let out a rough, mocking laugh and pivoted to confront her, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the podium. "This isn't just any dive bar, darling," he remarked, his voice laced with a hint of superiority. He made a motion towards her. "Jeans?" The chalk smudges vivid against the denim. "If you can't present yourself appropriately, it's best to stay away." With a flick of his hand, he brushed off the matter as if it were an insignificant annoyance, then redirected his attention to Sophia, anticipating her to mirror his contempt. Sophia's gaze darted between them, her smile wavering for a moment before transforming into a carefully maintained composure. She cleared her throat, a slight, uneasy sound, yet remained silent, her quietness an unspoken acceptance of Charles's assessment. Aisha sensed the room shift, the burden of their shared rejection bearing down on her chest. The patrons observed intently, some with unabashed curiosity, others discreetly from the periphery of their vision. A captivating scene emerging amidst their foie gras and champagne. A gentleman clad in a velvet blazer cast a sly grin into his drink. A woman adorned with pearls held her napkin tightly, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her lips. Aisha's heart raced, yet she stood her ground. She reminded herself once more that this wasn't about them. Concerned, "Is that you, Daniel?" Concerning their affection, regarding a commitment she was determined to hold on to. "Sir," she said, her voice elevating slightly to assert her presence, now speaking directly to Charles. "I recognize that this location carries a certain notoriety. I'm simply looking to reserve a table, not to cause any disruption." Her words were carefully chosen, a lifeline cast into the mounting tension, yet Charles remained unresponsive. With a dramatic roll of his eyes, he leaned in and whispered to Sophia, "Please take care of this if you would. My guests are eagerly anticipating my arrival." He walked confidently to a table by the window, his laughter echoing behind him like a playful challenge, leaving Aisha once again in the company of Sophia. The maitre d' regained her poise, her demeanor snapping back into form, yet the atmosphere around them buzzed with the tension that Charles had ignited. Aisha's hands tightened at her sides, the chalk dust transferring onto her palms. She had more to say still. She faced Sophia again, her determination a solid force within her, prepared to confront this new barrier, unaware of the turmoil that would soon follow. The resonance of Charles Grayson's laughter lingered in the air of the ivory tower, a toxic thread intertwining with the gilded ambience of the dining room. Aisha Johnson stood at the maitre d' podium, her dark eyes fixed on Sophia, whose silence had solidified into a barrier of indifference following Charles's exit. The reservation book lay shut beneath Sophia's hands, a silent symbol of the denial Aisha was unwilling to confront. Her gray sweater felt suddenly too warm, the chalk smudges on her jeans a glaring mark beneath the chandelier's unyielding light. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, as some patrons observed with unabashed interest while others wore subtle, knowing smiles, the tension winding ever tighter, like a spring on the verge of release. Aisha's heart raced, yet her voice remained calm, a beacon amidst the chaos. "As I mentioned, it's scheduled for next week. I'm not looking to create any issues." Sophia's lips quivered slightly, a brief hint of an emotion, maybe unease, before her composure reasserted itself. She leaned in a bit, her voice falling to a soft, sharp whisper. "It's not about money," she remarked, her gaze drifting over Aisha's deep complexion and unadorned attire. "We cater to a specific audience." The words struck with precision, cutting through Aisha's tranquility like a finely honed edge. The suggestion was clear as day. Her darkness, her raw essence, felt out of place in this sanctuary of affluence. Aisha felt a familiar ache blossom in her chest, yet she maintained her gaze on Sophia, determined not to reveal the sting of her emotions. She had encountered this feeling previously, wearing it like a second skin, yet tonight it seared more intensely, ignited by the reason she had come for Daniel, their anniversary, their shared history intricately linked to this very spot. Before she had the chance to reply, a voice resonated from the other side of the room, breaking the delicate silence. Some individuals seem unaware of their role. Charles Grayson beckoned from his table by the window, his flushed face illuminated by a broad smile. He lifted his glass, the crimson liquid swirling as he motioned toward Aisha. "This isn't a place for free rides." Joyful sounds burst forth, a shadowy wave cascading across the surrounding tables. Sharp barks from men in formal attire, stifled laughter from elegantly dressed women. Within gems, the noise gnawed at Aisha's determination, every laugh a sharp sting piercing her dignity. Her cheeks burned, warmth rising up her neck, yet she anchored herself to the marble floor, her hands tightening at her sides. She would stand firm, unwavering in this moment. The focus of the dining room intensified, an unwelcome spotlight illuminating her presence. A gentleman clad in a velvet jacket leaned in closer to his companion, whispering something that elicited a playful smirk. A woman adorned with a pearl choker tilted her head, her lips pursed in a subtle expression of amusement. Aisha sensed their gaze piercing through her, exposing her to her core, her attire, her essence. She stood tall, her voice elevating to assert her presence. "I'm simply attempting to secure a reservation," she stated, turning her attention back to Sophia, her tone steady yet assertive. "That concludes everything." Yet, Sophia's expression remained unchanged. If anything, the chill deepened, her hands still cradling the reservation book as if it were a cherished artifact. Then arrived the footsteps, sharp and commanding, slicing through the laughter like a knife through fine fabric. Margaret, the manager, stepped into the light of the dining room, her heels echoing on the marble floor with a cadence that signaled control. In her 40s, she exuded confidence, her blonde hair elegantly twisted, while her black dress embraced her figure, a true emblem of authority. Her eyes, a vivid shade of green, locked onto Aisha as she drew nearer, becoming more intense with every stride. "Is there an issue present?" she inquired, her tone sleek yet sharp, aimed squarely at Sophia. The maitre d' stood tall, her voice smooth and polished. "Text, this woman is departing," she said, indicating Aisha with a swift motion of her hand. Aisha's jaw clenched, the falsehood igniting a surge of rebellion. "Actually, I'm not," she said, turning to Margaret, her voice unwavering despite the fire in her chest. "I'm looking to reserve a table for a special occasion for my husband and me." She allowed the words to linger, a subtle declaration of her presence. Yet Margaret's eyes remained steadfast. It cascaded over her, from her untamed curls to her worn sneakers, and transformed into something rigid, resolute. "You're disturbing our guests," Margaret said, her voice sharp, her gaze directed at Charles's table, where he sat with a self-satisfied smile, his wine glass lifted in a feigned toast. Aisha's heart pounded, a clash of disbelief and simmering anger tightening in her throat. "Interrupting them?" she echoed, her gaze darting to the diners, their laughter hanging in the air like a tangible presence. "I find myself here inquiring about a reservation. How does that sound?" Charles interrupted, his voice resonating throughout the room like a bold fanfare. "Some individuals just don't understand," he exclaimed, reclining in his chair. "This isn't the sort of environment that suits you." More laughter erupted, now a cacophony of scorn that overwhelmed her voice. A lady in a crimson dress covered her mouth with her hand, suppressing a laugh. A gentleman adorned with a gold watch shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips as he gazed into his plate. Margaret approached, her demeanor radiating a commanding presence. "Enough," she declared, her voice steady yet resolute, her gaze fixed on Aisha. "It's time for you to go." The decree was absolute, a hammer falling, yet Aisha remained still. Her hands quivered, the chalk blending into her palms, yet her posture remained unwavering. "I just want to book a table," she repeated, her voice softer now, the words a plea encased in resolve. Margaret's lips pressed together, her patience wearing thin. "You're not welcome here," she said, her voice turning sharp and cold. "This isn't the way." The atmosphere felt suffocating, with laughter and glances wrapping around like a constricting cord. Aisha's breath caught in her throat, the sting of humiliation coursing through her. Yet she stood firm, her gaze aflame with a determination they could not extinguish. This was for Daniel, for their love, and she refused to let it conclude here, not just yet. The atmosphere in the lofty chamber buzzed with a sharp intensity, the echoes of laughter from Charles Grayson's table lingering in Aisha Johnson's mind like a cruel inscription etched in stone. She remained fixed in place before the master of the stage, her gray sweater hugging her form. Her figure stood out, her dark skin boldly contrasting with the room's pale luxury. Margaret, the manager, approached with an imposing presence, her green eyes shining with a chilling command. Her words, "You're not welcome here, not like this," lingered in the air like a sword poised to strike. The conversation in the dining room faded to a soft murmur, as the distinguished guests of Atlanta became captivated by the scene illuminated beneath the shimmering chandelier. Aisha's hands quivered at her sides, the chalk smudges on her jeans blurring further into her palms, yet her voice remained resolute, a strand of strength interlaced with the passion burning within her. "I just want to book a table," she said again, her voice softer now, her gaze fixed on Margaret's unwavering stare. Margaret's lips tightened into a sharp line, her patience unraveling like an old thread. "I've asked you to leave," she said, her voice lowering to a menacing whisper, each syllable sharp and cold. "Complete the task immediately or I will have to take action." The weight of the threat settled like a stone in Aisha's gut, yet she remained unyielding. Shock coursed through her, clashing with the fury that intensified with each fleeting moment. "Removed," she echoed, her voice lifting slightly to break the silence that enveloped the room. "Why is reserving a table a justification for kicking me out?" Her eyes flicked to the diners, some wearing smirks, others turning away, seeking a glimmer of understanding. Within this ornate confinement, Charles's voice pierced the air once more, a commanding roar from his seat by the window. Some individuals require it to be articulated more than once. He boasted, reclining in his chair, his flushed face illuminated by a broad smile. Remove her from the situation now. The words elicited another surge of laughter, biting and harsh, flowing through the tables like a sinister wave. A gentleman in a velvet blazer snapped his fingers, a sharp sound of mirth escaping him. A lady in a crimson dress concealed her sly grin behind a napkin. Aisha's cheeks burned with embarrassment, a palpable shame gnawing at her core, yet she stood her ground resolutely. She glanced back at Margaret, her breath quickening, her determination a fragile spark she refused to let extinguish. "This is absurd," she remarked, her tone unwavering even as her hands shook slightly. "I'm just a customer, like everyone else here." Margaret's expression grew steely, her head angling toward Charles's table as though his mere presence issued an unspoken directive. "Enough," she snapped, her tone decisive, like a gavel striking in a courtroom. With a commanding wave of her hand, she summoned attention with a sharp call. "James." A young man clad in a black uniform stepped out from the shadows by the entrance, his movements tentative, his expression betraying a deep sense of discomfort. At just 20, he approached with wide brown eyes filled with unease, his hands hovering awkwardly by his sides. "Escort her out," Margaret commanded, her tone sharp and unyielding, leaving no space for hesitation. James hesitated, his eyes darting. He glanced at Aisha, then turned to Margaret, nodding as a sense of obligation took precedence over his hesitations. Aisha's heart raced, a frantic rhythm echoing within her chest. "Wait," she said, her voice elevating, a hint of desperation weaving into her composure. "My husband is—" She halted, the words choking her as Margaret's lips twisted into a derisive grin. "Certainly someone of significance," the manager interjected, her voice laced with a sharp edge of irony. "We hear that repeatedly. It remains unchanged." The dismissal struck like a sudden blow, sharp and stinging, causing Aisha to catch her breath, her thoughts swirling in a frantic dance. She felt the urge to express it. "Daniel Johnson, the tech mogul, my husband who would completely transform your perspective." Yet the words eluded her, stifled by the ridiculousness of having to validate her worth to these unfamiliar faces. James moved in a bit, his tone gentle, carrying a hint of remorse. "Ma'am, please," he said, his hand hovering near her elbow, cautious not to make contact. "Join me on this journey." Aisha shot a glance at him, then turned her gaze back to Margaret, her defiance igniting once more. "Is this really the reason you're casting me aside?" she inquired, her voice soft, quaking with a rage she struggled to suppress. "Are you attempting to secure a reservation?" Margaret's expression remained steadfast. "You're making a spectacle," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion, conclusive. "Depart." Charles interjected once more, his laughter a harsh reverberation. "So, you've reached the end of your rope, have you?" The chamber burst into chaos again, the echo of a blade turning in Aisha's dignity. She remained motionless, the burden of their disdain bearing heavily upon her, suffocating. James shifted awkwardly, his hand lingering in the air, his gaze filled with desperation. "Madam," he whispered, his voice gentle, a subtle encouragement. Aisha's eyes scanned the room, taking in the smirking faces, the averted gazes, and the indifferent air of affluence. And something within her broke, not in surrender but in determination. She refused to grant them the pleasure of witnessing her crumble. Taking a measured breath, she pivoted, allowing James to lead her to the door. Her sneakers squeaked on the marble, each step echoing her departure, the laughter following her like a lingering shadow. The glass door stood before her, a gateway to the evening she had departed from. With James keeping it open, his gaze lowered, Aisha hesitated. Her voice was a soft murmur, intended solely for her own ears. "Just wait and see." She stepped outside, the cool air embracing her flushed face like a soothing balm, while the city's hum enveloped the fading echoes of the dining room. Her hand reached for her phone, fingers quivering as she grasped it tightly, the ache of rejection sharp and throbbing. Unbeknownst to her, Daniel's Bentley was already approaching, its polished exterior hinting at an impending confrontation she was not yet aware of. The night air outside the ivory tower enveloped Aisha Johnson in a frigid embrace, the October chill penetrating her senses. As she stood on the sidewalk, her breath forming faint wisps in the chilly air, the glass door swung shut behind her with a final hollow thud, cutting her off from the dining room's gilded scorn. Her gray sweater wrapped around her like a shield. Her sneakers clung to the pavement, anchoring her in place, as the reverberations of Charles Grayson's laughter and Margaret's chilling order, "Leave," continued to gnaw at her thoughts. Her dark skin tingled with the sharpness of embarrassment, her hands quivering as they gripped her phone, the screen casting a faint light in the city's dusk. She had been cast aside, her straightforward plea for a reservation distorted into a spectacle of humiliation, and the burden of it bore down on her chest, a lingering ache she couldn't dispel. Her fingers lingered above Daniel's name, pausing as a deep, captivating purr cut through the ambient noise of the street, a sound that drew her attention and quickened her heartbeat. A polished black Bentley Continental came to a smooth halt at the curb, its elegant curves reflecting the warm glow from the windows of the ivory tower. The engine's growl faded to a whisper as the driver's door swung open, revealing Daniel Johnson, a silhouette of understated strength against the darkness. At 38, he was a white man, his pale skin and sharp features masking the fierce ambition that had forged his tech empire. His navy suit embraced his slender silhouette, the material subtly conveying affluence, while his sandy hair shimmered under the streetlight as he adjusted himself. He had wrapped up a meeting ahead of time, a rare pause in his unyielding routine, and recalled Aisha's casual remark about visiting the ivory tower, a delightful surprise, he mused, an opportunity to sweep her off her feet. He was taken aback to see her standing there, her figure illuminated by the warm light of the restaurant, a question dancing in his thoughts. Within the confines of the dining room, a gentle hum persisted, unaware of the impending change lurking just outside its boundaries. The chandeliers bathed the scene in a warm golden glow, illuminating the pristine white tablecloths, while the delicate clinking of crystal and soft whispers of affluence filled the air without interruption. Charles Grayson commanded the room from his window table, his hearty laughter emphasizing the tale he spun for his audience, while Margaret gracefully returned to her position, the sound of her heels echoing a sense of regained composure. Sophia stood at the podium, her black suit impeccably tailored, her hands gliding over the reservation book as if erasing the chaos left by Aisha's presence. The room had quieted, the event fading from memory, until the glass door swung open once more, a rush of cool air cutting through the warm, lavender-scented atmosphere. Daniel entered, his presence a subtle force that resonated throughout the room. He stood in the doorway, his tall frame commanding attention, while his piercing blue eyes surveyed the room with a sharpness refined through countless negotiations. The murmur faded, a slight pause as gazes shifted, some filled with intrigue, others marked by familiarity. His name resonated in Atlanta, a hint of immense innovation, yet tonight he was merely a man searching for his wife. His eyes moved beyond the diners, beyond Charles's self-satisfied smile, and settled on Aisha's silhouette through the glass, standing solitary on the sidewalk. A line deepened on his forehead, uncertainty transforming into a more intense, defensive emotion. Sophia's gaze shot upward, her well-rehearsed smile blossoming as she took in his tailored suit and confident demeanor. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice flowing with a polished elegance, a sharp departure from the chill she'd shown Aisha. "Greetings from the realm of intellect. Is there a reservation under your name?" Daniel approached the podium with measured steps, his shoes making no sound on the marble floor, his expression inscrutable yet infused with a subtle intensity. "I'm meeting my wife," he said, his voice low and steady, a current flowing beneath the surface of his calm demeanor. "Johnson. Daniel Johnson." The name fell heavily into the calm surface, and Sophia's smile wavered, a spark of recognition illuminating her gaze. She recognized that name. It was known throughout Atlanta's circles, belonging to a white tech titan whose fortune could easily purchase this restaurant multiple times over. Her hands lingered above the reservation book, a moment of uncertainty flickering before she regained her poise. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her tone lifting, yet a hint of doubt lingered beneath the surface. "It seems we might not have you scheduled for this evening." Daniel's gaze remained steady, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that compelled her to stand tall. "That's because my wife arrived to create one," he stated, his words measured, each a stride nearer to the truth he felt hovering. "It appears she has just stepped out for our anniversary next week." He gestured toward the window where Aisha lingered, her phone clutched in hand, her dark figure a striking contrast against the night. Sophia's smile became rigid, her thoughts swirling beneath her carefully crafted facade. She had just sent away a woman in a gray sweater, a black woman who didn't conform to the ivory tower's expectations. But now this man, this name, stood before her, connecting that woman to a reality she had never envisioned. "Was your wife here?" she inquired, her tone delicately navigating the inquiry, cautiously probing the terrain. Daniel's head tilted, his eyes narrowing slightly, a tempest brewing within their depths. "Indeed," he remarked, his voice remaining steady yet tinged with a sharpness that made the atmosphere grow tense. "She brought up our anniversary. You would definitely recall her. Dark hair, gray sweater. Does that ring a bell?" The atmosphere thickened, as if the space itself paused, with the murmur of conversation becoming a faint echo. Sophia's fingers danced nervously on the podium, her throat constricting with anticipation. As she swallowed, the fragments fell into alignment, but only after the moment had passed. Outside, Aisha raised her gaze, the Bentley's shine capturing her attention, a flicker of familiarity igniting within her heart. Daniel was present, her Daniel, and the night was poised to shift dramatically, an unforeseen reckoning that she hadn't anticipated but was powerless to prevent. The glass door of the ivory tower loomed like a watchful guardian, its gleaming surface mirroring the warm radiance inside, alongside the enigmatic silhouette of Aisha Johnson just outside. She paused on the sidewalk, her breath forming clouds in the October chill, her dark eyes locked onto the polished Bentley that had just come to a halt. Her phone vibrated in her grasp, the ache of her dismissal still fresh, a scar etched by Sophia's chill and Margaret's sharpness. Inside, Daniel Johnson stood at the maitre d' podium, his navy suit a subtle testament to his authority, his voice a deep rumble as he pressed Sophia with a question that loomed like a storm cloud. "You would definitely remember her. Raven locks, charcoal knitwear. Does that ring a bell?" The atmosphere thickened with unspoken tension, and Sophia's smile faltered, her complexion paling as the truth settled in, a dark veil descending over her carefully crafted facade. Sophia's lips parted, a stammer beginning to take shape, yet Daniel did not pause. He pivoted, his movements quick and confident, and swung the door wide, the refreshing night breeze sweeping in after him. "Aisha," he called, his voice gentle yet resolute, slicing through the city's murmur. She glanced upward, her breath hitching as their gazes locked, his blue eyes piercing with worry, hers deep and shimmering with a blend of relief and pain. He reached out, his pale fingers unwavering, and she accepted, her chalk-dusted palms fitting into his. With a soft tug, he brought her back inside, the door closing with a thud that resonated like a judge's gavel. The murmur of the dining room faltered, a wave of tension coursing through the air as the couple emerged into the light, their shared presence radiating an unvoiced defiance. "Is everything all right?" Daniel inquired softly, his tone intimate, reserved solely for her, as his thumb gently caressed her knuckles. Aisha's eyes locked onto his, her lips forming a tight line as she replied, "Not entirely." Her tone remained even, yet beneath it surged a tide of feelings, anger, fatigue, and the heavy burden of the rejection she had just faced. Daniel's brow knitted in concern, his gaze probing hers before darting back to Sophia, who remained motionless at the podium, her hands gripping the reservation book as if it were her only anchor. The room held its breath, the clink of glasses and murmur of voices dwindling to a taut silence, the atmosphere heavy with expectation. Margaret stepped out from the shadows of the dining room, her heels creating a crisp cadence on the marble floor, her blonde hair shimmering beneath the glow of the chandeliers. She felt the change, the unease at the doorway, and her green eyes narrowed as she moved closer, observing Daniel's suit, his demeanor, and Aisha next to him in her gray sweater. "Is there a problem?" she inquired, her tone fluid yet sharp, like a dagger wrapped in velvet. Daniel faced her, his stance resolute, a tempest of tranquility contained within. Indeed, he spoke, his words measured, each one a pebble cast into calm waters. "Liquid sustenance. I've been informed that my wife was recently asked to leave your establishment." Margaret's polished facade faltered for a moment, a brief flash of astonishment illuminating her features before she swiftly restored her poise. A moment of confusion, she exclaimed hastily, her gaze flitting between Daniel's evident affluence and Aisha's relaxed outfit, her thoughts swirling as she tried to make sense of the contrast. "We uphold specific expectations for our visitors." Her tone was rehearsed, a shield she had used previously, yet it wavered beneath Daniel's scrutiny. He tilted his head, his voice unwavering yet tinged with a sharpness that sent a tremor through the air. "Criteria?" He reiterated, the word lingering as if daring a response. "What specific criteria would prevent my wife from securing a reservation?" The inquiry struck with the force of a lightning bolt, echoing throughout the space. Sophia's complexion drained of color, her grip on the podium becoming more intense, her previous disregard for Aisha now lingering like a specter in her quietude. Margaret parted her lips, a reply taking shape, but just as she was about to articulate it, a voice thundered from the window table, breaking the tension like fragile glass. She caused quite the stir. Charles Grayson shouted, leaning forward in his chair, his flushed face a testament to the wine and his boldness. He motioned toward Aisha with a robust hand, the gold cufflink shimmering in the light. "There are individuals who simply do not fit in an environment such as this." The atmosphere in the dining room became tense, as all eyes shifted from Charles to Daniel and Aisha. The mirth that had previously lifted his jibes had vanished, leaving behind a tense silence. Daniel pivoted deliberately, his blue eyes fixing on Charles with an intense focus that has the power to slice through steel. "And you are?" he inquired, his tone unervingly serene, a hunter assessing its target. Charles stood tall, unshaken, his smile growing broader. "Charles Grayson," he proclaimed, his voice laden with an air of superiority. "I'm a familiar face, and I'm well acquainted with the way things operate." He reclined, anticipating respect, unaware of the change in the room's atmosphere. Daniel's head tilted, his eyes narrowing with focus. "You offered your thoughts on how they treated my wife?" he inquired, his tone gentle yet deadly, like a knife emerging from its scabbard. Charles felt his confidence falter, a hint of uncertainty etching his forehead, yet he pressed on, his voice growing stronger. She averted her gaze. He gestured toward Aisha's jeans, her sweater, and her dark skin as though they were pieces of evidence in a courtroom drama. Aisha's grip on Daniel's hand grew firmer, her breathing becoming steady, her quietness radiating a strength that enveloped him like an electric charge. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the expressions of the diners a canvas of astonishment and intrigue, the air crackling with the imminent revelation. Margaret advanced, her voice softening to a soothing whisper. "Sir, might we consider having this conversation in private?" Yet Daniel's gaze remained fixed on Charles, while Aisha stood beside him, a steady flame, unwavering. The clash had commenced, a reckoning set to dismantle the delicate veneer of the ivory tower. The dining room of the ivory tower was enveloped in a tense stillness, the atmosphere heavy with the significance of Daniel Johnson's inquiry. "How did you express your thoughts on that?" "My wife received treatment from them." A subtle edge that cut through Charles Grayson's bravado. Daniel stood next to Aisha, his navy suit sharply contrasting with her gray sweater, his pale hand enveloping her dark one. Their togetherness a bold symbol beneath the chandelier's warm light. Charles's flushed complexion wavered, his smile faltering, as he took in the resolve reflected in Daniel's azure gaze. Yet he held onto his bravado, his voice a harsh growl. She just doesn't belong, just look at her. The words reverberated, a final breath of hubris, and the silence in the room thickened, each patron a spectator to the impending tempest. Daniel's eyes remained steady, his composure a smoldering fire contained. He advanced, his voice elevating slightly, each word resonating like a hammer against solid rock. "My wife, Aisha Johnson," he began, his tone steady and deliberate, "a community advocate and board member of the Johnson Foundation, the woman who simply wanted to book our anniversary dinner here, where we had our first date 10 years ago." The announcement struck with the force of a storm, echoing through the grand chamber. Sophia stood at the podium, her hands clutching the book tightly, as if it could protect her from the reality before her. Margaret's green eyes widened, her composed facade faltering, her thoughts racing to reshape the story she had crafted. Charles's mouth opened and closed, his confidence disintegrating like parched soil beneath the pressure of Daniel's words. Aisha stood confidently beside him, her dark skin shimmering in the light, her quiet demeanor a powerful statement that resonated more than the mockery she had faced. The expressions of the diners transformed, smiles evaporating, gazes flitting about, a tableau of unease taking the place of their previous delight. Daniel's voice took on a gentler tone, yet the sharpness lingered, a finely crafted instrument shaped by passion and anger. "She arrived for our sake," he remarked, his eyes scanning the space, "and you assessed her by her attire, her complexion, rather than her true value." The accusation lingered, a reflection cast upon the gilded biases of the ivory tower, and the atmosphere felt as though it contracted beneath its weight. A swift motion shattered the silence. From the shadows, James, the young staffer who had guided Aisha out, emerged into view. His dark uniform draped loosely over his slender build, his brown eyes burning with a fierce intensity that contradicted his previous uncertainty. "She attempted to convey her thoughts," he remarked, his voice quivering yet distinct, slicing through the stillness like a bell, but time and again, no one paid heed. He grabbed his jacket, yanked it off with a swift motion, and flung it onto the podium next to Sophia. "I quit," he declared, his words cutting through the silence like a sudden explosion. "I've reached my limit with this." Sophia's gaze darted to him, her calm demeanor fracturing. "James, don't be absurd," she began. Yet he merely shook his head, his determination an impenetrable barrier she couldn't overcome. The atmosphere shifted, a wave of disbelief coursing through. Yet the story was far from finished. An elderly couple rose from a table near the back, their movements measured and unhurried. The woman, her silver hair elegantly swept into a bun, donned a simple black dress that exuded an air of understated wealth. Her husband, bent yet unwavering, fidgeted with his tie, his hand quivering slightly. They traversed the dining room, their footsteps a soft rhythm, and paused before Daniel and Aisha. "Young man," the woman said, her voice imbued with the wisdom of years gone by. "Indeed, you are correct." She pivoted, her eyes scanning the team. "Sophia." Margaret, the waiter, stands still, caught in a moment of pause. "We've been coming here for 15 years, she said. "But tonight marks the end. This place once cherished integrity, but now it seems to prioritize mere facades." Her husband nodded, his tone rough yet resolute. "We're done," he declared, his gaze fixed on Charles, who fidgeted in his chair, the wine glass slipping from his mind. The couple's stance was a fissure in the pristine facade, a rift that deepened as murmurs circulated among the patrons. Charles cleared his throat, a spark of confidence reigniting within him. "Now, Margaret," he said, speaking to the older woman with an air of insincere intimacy. "You're being dramatic." But she interrupted him, her voice cutting through the air. "Charles, it's not your place to determine what's right in this situation." The sharp criticism left him speechless, his cheeks flushing as the focus of the room shifted, an unexpected glare he wasn't prepared for. Aisha gripped Daniel's hand firmly, her breath becoming more even as the tide began to change. She experienced no sense of victory, just a subdued sorrow for the rawness of the harsh reality exposed. "Daniel," she whispered, her tone gentle, a thread drawing him closer. "Let us proceed." He glanced at her, his gaze gentle, yet the flames continued to flicker. "Not yet," he replied, then turned to Margaret, who had moved closer, her hands tightly clasped in a fervent attempt to regain control. "Mr. Johnson," she uttered, her voice taut, "I would appreciate it if we could have this conversation in private." Yet Aisha articulated her thoughts, her voice sharp and precise, slicing through the request. She stated with conviction, her eyes fixed intently on Margaret, that you had been explicit about your expectations. "I didn't encounter them." Daniel nodded, his choice settled. "Our anniversary was centered around values," he stated, his voice resonating, genuine ones. "This location feels out of place." He pivoted, leading Aisha to the door, her sneakers making soft squeaks against the marble floor. James trailed behind, his footsteps now more buoyant, his voice slicing through the stillness as he closed the gap. "Thank you," he remarked, his gaze fixed on them both, for having the courage to stand up. The glass door stood before them, a gateway to the night, and as they approached, the dining room observed a scene of disbelief, embarrassment, and an undeniable reality they could not ignore. The night air beyond the ivory tower enveloped Aisha and Daniel Johnson as they emerged from its glass doors, the remnants of Charles Grayson's wavering confidence and Margaret's empty cries dissipating into the city's murmur. Aisha's gray sweater brushed against Daniel's navy suit as they walked, her dark hand still clasped in his pale one, a subtle strength connecting them. The Bentleys shone at the curb, a quiet observer of the turmoil they had departed. Yet their strides led them away from it, toward a future free from the restaurant's ornate restraints. James walked a few steps behind, his uniform jacket discarded, his youthful face glowing with a newfound determination sparked by their stand. The October sky unfurled above, a tapestry of stars cutting through the city's haze, and Aisha sensed the evening's burden ease, a mark healing beneath the assurance of something more genuine. 3 weeks later, the air carried a crisper edge, as the city embraced the essence of late fall. Aisha lingered outside a humble brick structure on the west side of Atlanta, where the windows cast a golden glow onto the uneven pavement. A modest sign proclaimed, "Community Hearth," and beyond the glass, she glimpsed long wooden tables filled with a diverse gathering of people. Families, solitary souls, laborers in tattered coats, whose laughter resonated like a genuine, unrefined melody. She donned a simple dress now, her curls flowing freely, her chalk-dusted jeans exchanged for comfort over artifice. Daniel lingered next to her, his tie missing, his sandy hair tousled by the gentle breeze. This evening marked their anniversary, a decade since that initial date at the Ivory Tower. They had selected this venue, a pay-what-you-can eatery, where value transcended wealth or appearance. The aroma of garlic and freshly baked bread filled the air, while the clinking of plates created a vibrant melody. A cheerful young server welcomed them with a bright smile, her gaze free of judgment, and guided them to a table next to a family joyfully celebrating a child's birthday, colorful balloons dancing overhead. Across from them sat an elderly man, his hands quivering as he delicately spooned soup, his smile modest yet sincere. Aisha nestled into her chair, her shoulders relaxing, the recollection of the Ivory Tower's chandeliers giving way to this raw, inviting warmth. Daniel extended his hand beneath the table, his blue eyes gentle and warm. "Happy anniversary," he whispered, and she beamed, the pain of that night 3 weeks prior fading into a distant memory. The dish was unpretentious. Roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, a slice of cornbread that fell apart at the touch of her fork, yet it was infused with warmth, a sense of togetherness. Words danced in the air, unrestrained and spontaneous, as laughter burst forth when a child playfully smeared icing on his father's cheek. Aisha felt her heart swell as thoughts of James filled her mind. He called days after that night, his voice buzzing with enthusiasm over the line. Under her mentorship, He had proposed a program to the Johnson Foundation, education for struggling youth, a connection forged from his personal journey. And it had received support, a seed nurtured from the remnants of the ivory towers. Bias. This evening, he would be among them, a visitor in this place that embraced everyone. The door creaked open, and James entered, his tall figure enveloped in a tattered jacket, his brown eyes sparkling with life. He caught sight of them and raised a hand, navigating through the tables with a smile. "You made it," Aisha said as he sat, her voice filled with warmth. "Absolutely not," he responded, his eyes scanning the space. "This location, it exists." Daniel nodded, his fingers intertwined with Aisha's. "It's exactly what we envisioned," he remarked. "A celebration that truly represents us." The server presented James with a plate, and they dined in unison, the gentle clinking of forks creating a subtle melody, the evening a reflection of principles shaped beyond mere facades. Outside these confines, the lofty ideals had crumbled. An incisive piece in the Atlanta Journal ignited murmurs, followed by a wave of indignation. Its uniqueness revealed. Margaret had stepped down. Sophia had followed suit. Her letter to Aisha a heartfelt admission of remorse. Not merely for that evening, but for a habit she now aimed to break. The establishment had undergone a transformation, its fresh signage extending an invitation to all, a delicate pledge to restore what had been lost. Aisha absorbed Sophia's words, sensed their significance, and then placed them aside. Not forgiven, not yet, but receptive to the potential for development. In the soft glow of the community hearth, Aisha nestled closer to Daniel, her voice barely above a whisper. "Value isn't defined by appearance or rank," she remarked, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "It's about character and connection." Daniel grasped her hand tightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've always been aware of that," he remarked, "and you continue to demonstrate it to me." The stars outside sparkled like a silent symphony, and Aisha reminisced about their first date, his pale hand gently grazing hers, their love boldly challenging the constraints of the world. That night at the ivory tower had pushed them to their limits. But now, in this humble refuge, they had found their strength once more. James leaned in, his voice cutting through her daydream. "You both altered the course of events," he remarked, his voice sincere. "Not solely for my benefit, but for all those they've marginalized." Aisha's smile was subtle yet genuine. "It isn't finished," she remarked. "It is embarking on a new journey." The evening lingered, embracing warmth and vitality, a poignant conclusion to a narrative that commenced with denial and culminated in revelation. A truth in Atlanta, one that would linger in their memories. As Aisha and Daniel's tale drifts into the embrace of Atlanta's night, we invite your thoughts and reflections. What emotions did their journey evoke within you? We'd love to hear your insights in the comments. Your perspective is important to us. We appreciate your company on this journey through bias and victory. Your presence breathes life into these stories. Remain by our side. Additional narratives of authenticity and strength are forthcoming. Until we meet again, take care and continue to radiate your brilliance.